tell.
My
Before we get started, I wanted to show you this because this is my coaster for the day. Can you see it?
You gotta lift it up. I can't even. It's very appropriate.
Yeah, that's about where I am.
I put on pants today. Pretty happy with myself.
So I'm Courtney, and this is my friend Jennifer Dalmam. She's a partner at Walker Lamb. And, the point of these is that I wanted to try to get all my very smart friends who are experts in their field to try to give us things we can do while we're homebound that will help us prepare for other parts in our life, or that will help us now, either with calming or creating or projects. First of all, Jennifer, I know I'm open for business, so I can still virtually see a client. I can virtually tour their home. I can virtually have someone tour a home for them. So even though I'm socially distancing and my people are socially distancing, right now North Carolina real estate's open. That's subject to changing, obviously, day by day. This is all kind of up in the air. And at some point, it will be fully open and normal again. How are y'all doing? And tell me a little bit what you do, too, because I kind of forgot to say that.
Sure. So I am an estate planning attorney at the law firm Walker Lamb. So I do estate planning, which are things like wills, trust, powers of attorney, as well as elder law, which is planning for eligibility for government benefits to pay for long-term care, planning for loved ones with special needs to allow them to keep government benefits but still get an inheritance. So things like that. We are absolutely still open for business. As you can see, most of us are working from home offices right now. It's been an interesting, very quick transition from almost everything happening in the office to everything happening remotely, as I'm sure your business has as well. So most of our meetings are now telephone or video conferencing like that. It's instead of now your office or mine, it's your Zoom meeting room or mine. But kind of inherently documents have to be signed in person, and so we are still actually seeing clients for signing conferences, but taking a lot of precautions. We've actually implemented curbside execution of documents, and so we are sending clients drafts of their documents, having a telephone call or Zoom meeting to walk them through the documents and what the kind of elections are that they have to initial, and make sure that they understand what the documents say and they say what they want them to say. And then clients are actually coming to our parking lot, staying in their car. We are, sending documents through their window so that they can sign, and then they're passing them back out for witnessing and notarization. There's a group of attorneys lobbying the legislation and lobbying for legislation in North Carolina right now. I can't talk. To allow video signing of documents. So if I'm here signing a document and you're there but can see me on the computer, that you could witness my signature, but that's unfortunately not a reality right now. And so we are still having to meet in person for signing conferences, but just about everything else is done remotely.
Makes sense. Do you know, are most states allowing virtual signatures at this point?
I don't know of any states that allow virtual signatures at this point. It's a very recent phenomenon where we've kind of needed that. So, and traditionally, even when a client couldn't travel to us, we could go to their nursing home, we could go to the hospital bed. I've done signings in ICUs before where we've brought legal assistants to serve as witnesses and notaries. This is kind of just a completely brand new situation where, it's not safe for us, it's not safe for the clients. To have meetings in person. I went to actually refinance my house yesterday, went to the closing attorney, and they were wearing masks and gloves. And so if we could get our hands on masks and gloves, we would probably go that route too. But right now, curbside.
And they should probably go to hospitals right now. So, and for people in North Carolina, we do have, if you have a loan, there are things that have to be signed in person. If you're doing a cash transaction, it's a little different. So depends on your transaction, but right now, as long as the Register of Deeds is open, we can. Well, most counties, Register of Deeds are open virtually. Durham's a little bit confusing right now, but that's a different story. Well, I was thinking about you because I watched a movie that I loved last night, and I think you would love it, called Knives Out.
Okay. I've not heard of that one.
The premise is a murder mystery writer worth about 60 million dies, and his family gathers to read the will. And so I was thinking it's funny and it's dark and it's got everyone you love in it, from like Jamie Lee Curtis and Toni Collette and Don Johnson and Chris Pine. I mean, it's a pretty good cast of characters, and Daniel Craig doing the worst Southern accent you've ever heard. But it's funny and it's worth watching and it's perfect right now. And it got me thinking about you and people being stuck at home and estate planning, and what they, what I personally know. I use you. I already have a healthcare power of attorney. I have a will, but I don't have kids. So my estate's pretty simple. But what if you were new to this and you were scared because the world's kind of turning on end, what would you be recommending people do to kind of get themselves together and prepared? Not so much thinking they're going to die from this, but so that when the time came, they knew what to do.
Yeah, and that's a great question. We are getting a lot of phone calls and emails from folks that are asking these questions. One, certainly this has made people more think more about this type of planning, and two, we're stuck at home, and so we're crossing things off of the to-do list that maybe have been on the bottom for a little while, and estate planning is one of those types of items on a lot of people's to-do list. So in general, most people need a will. That's the one that people think about when they hear the term estate planning. Directing basically when you pass away, who's going to be in charge of handling your final affairs, and where do you want your assets to pass? How do you want them to pass? Is it outright to beneficiaries, in some kind of trust arrangement, custodial accounts for minors? Another one is a living trust or a revocable trust. The terms are interchangeable, but it's some people think of it as a will substitute. It's another tool that we have in our toolkit of how to pass assets when you pass away, but without the requirement of probate. So it saves a little bit of time and money and hassle for the people that you leave behind, and it's a kind of good option for a lot of our clients. But just as important, maybe even more so than planning for what happens when you pass away, is planning for what happens if you go through a period of incapacity while you're still alive. Everybody over the age of 18 needs a general power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. So the general power of attorney is the person that makes financial decisions for you, legal decisions for you, business decisions for you, if you're not available to, and that could be because of incapacity. It could be because you're quarantined in your house and something needs to happen in person. And so, it could be just not available for whatever reason. Healthcare power of attorney, which names somebody to make healthcare decisions for you if you are alive but don't have the capacity to make those for yourself. A lot of people want a living will, so it's not a required document, but if you want to make your wishes known about life-prolonging treatment if you were in your final illness, a lot of people want to take the burden of making that decision off of their family, and a HIPAA authorization, so who can have access to your health information and talk to your doctors. And so those are the four that adults need to think about. And then for anybody with minor children, there's also a document called an authorization to consent to healthcare for minors. So if the parents are, for whatever reason, not available to make healthcare decisions for their minor children, who would they want to name in their place to make those decisions? And so that's kind of the, obviously there are more complicated documents, but the basic estate planning package includes those few documents.
So, most people aren't going to probably run out and hire you or anyone right now. They're going to just start thinking. And I've been thinking a lot because, my family all lives out of state. Yeah. So I know where my documents are, and I've told my brothers, I think my parents, but okay. I don't necessarily know where my parents' documents are. And I don't know, I think I told you, I have a passcode on my phone where all my passwords are, so that, and someone can get into all my accounts, but they have to figure out my passcode on my phone. Now, I think most of my family could guess it, but, not everyone thinks that way. What should we be thinking about for preparation for knowing if you're not the person to go away or die, but it's unfortunately your parent and what you need to know?
Yeah, so one is everybody that's named in your documents should know where your documents are located. Now, you might not want to share with them yet who gets what, who's the executor, who's the backup, who are the beneficiaries, but everybody in your family should know where to locate your documents if and when the need arises. They should also know who to call, who are the professionals in your life. So who is your estate attorney that can help them interpret what do these legal documents mean? Who's your financial advisor that can help them know where the assets are and what the financial plan is? Who's your CPA? Who's your home and auto insurance? So all of those folks that keep your life running smoothly, you should make sure you have a list. And while we're all stuck at home is the perfect time to create that, of who are the professionals in your life that somebody can call on if and when they need to kind of take over because you've become incapacitated or have passed away. And that actually is a huge kind of gap in planning that we've seen for a lot of folks, is that they go to an estate attorney, they have a wonderful estate plan, it reflects their wishes, they keep it up to date, but then something happens to them unexpectedly, and the person that's their power of attorney agent doesn't even know where their accounts are. Online banking is absolutely wonderful, better for the environment to get paperless statements by your email, but if nobody can get into your email account to figure out, where is the money, they're going to have a hard time paying your bills. What are your bills? Again, paperless statements are absolutely wonderful. Auto pay is wonderful. I have everything in my life set up on auto pay so that I don't have to worry about writing checks every month. But the people that are named in my power of attorney, the people that are named as my executor, need to know what bills would have to be paid if something were to happen to me, to make sure that there's, the lights don't get turned off, or there's not a gap in coverage for an insurance policy or something like that. So making sure that folks know what bills there are, what assets there are, and you don't have to tell people the balances of your accounts if you're not ready to give that information yet. But at least tell your family, hey, if something happens to me, here's the person at Schwab to contact, and my bank accounts are at Bank of America. Those are the two places that you need to go, and having a list of that somewhere.
Yeah, and I would add, if you have people that you want to use, go ahead and get that known. So if you want to be at X funeral home, or your parents really care about, have a best friend is a realtor and you want to use that over the estate attorney's preferred realtor, go ahead and make that known, because that's important for peace of mind for everybody.
Yeah.
I was also thinking, like, I'm technically a small business and you're technically a small business. As a business owner, what should we be planning?
So as business owners, we should be thinking about business succession planning. So if something were to happen to me, who would take care of my clients? And thankfully, I'm at I would say, medium-sized firm. There are 4 other partners who, if something were to happen unexpectedly to me, would be able to take over, kind of seamlessly transition my practice over to them. But not everybody is lucky enough to practice with wonderful people like I do. And so small business owners really need to think about, if something were to happen to them, and maybe it's not permanent, maybe it's not they pass away, maybe it's temporary, they are hospitalized for a few weeks or months. Who knows where the bank accounts are, who knows where to go to access payroll, who knows who the preferred vendors are. So make sure that you're cross-training everything, including management responsibilities, with somebody else that could take over for you. Another thing, it's kind of morbid to think about, plan for, but if you're in a business with somebody else and something happens to one of you, your business partner passes away, do you want to be in business with your business partner's wife or their adult children? Or would you rather be able to buy out that business interest from your partner's estate? So having a good succession plan in place, having good buy-sell arrangements in place to make sure that what you guys envisioned when you formed the business will actually be carried out if and when something happens to one of you.
Yeah, and again, I'm not suggesting, you're not suggesting that anything's going to happen right now. I don't think for most of us it is. I think this is just if we're gonna all have to take pauses, let's just take a pause and actually be productive about it. I have realized, and I'm an introverted person, only so many hours a day I can read and watch Netflix without having some project. So I think I mentioned to Jennifer when we were on the phone a few minutes ago, my next project is to organize my refrigerator because it needs to happen. And, it's just good to have things to check off your to-do list.
Yeah, we are planners by nature. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're planning for the inevitable, and hopefully it's, many, many years in the future. I always tell my clients, I hope that the plan that we're putting in place for you right now is not the plan that you pass away with. I hope I see you again in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years when your kids get married and they have kids of their own and we need to add grandchildren to the plan or, appropriate people to make these decisions changes. But it's always good. And right now, while we're having to, like you said, take a pause and are able to knock some things off of our to-do list while we're stuck at home, it's a good idea to kind of start to make some of these plans that we tend to put at the bottom of our to-do list.
And do you see any impact happening for you if they do shut down essential businesses?
That is a good question. I was looking at the shutdowns in some of the other states that have happened. I was reading about Illinois last night, and they have professional services or one of the businesses that are excluded, which includes attorneys' offices. The right to counsel is so deeply ingrained in our society. I can't see them telling us that we can't practice. Now, it could get to a point where, both trying to be respectful of the shutdown and for the safety of our clients, ourselves, our staff, that we do everything remotely, kind of don't meet to sign documents unless it's absolutely necessary. If someone is on their deathbed, absolutely, we want to make sure that they get their will in place before they pass. So it could be that we have to kind of put pause on signing documents, but during that time, it's a great time to start having those conversations about what should the documents say, who should the decision makers be, how do we want to leave things to our kids. So I don't foresee our business shutting down. The one-on-one contact that's required for signing documents, we might put a pause on that except for in extreme circumstances, but thankfully, most of what we do, we're able to do remotely, so I don't see that stopping.
That's good. And I mean, I've got a few more fun questions for you, but one last kind of serious one. I was listening to a continuing legal ed, because that's what I do for fun, apparently. And they were talking a lot about, it was with an estate planning attorney, and she was talking about when her father died and how her father left her certain roles and hadn't told her older brother, who was about 14 years older. And he left a note that they read after the fact. And her brother had gotten very mad and not spoken to her for years because she'd gotten these roles. But her father wrote her and said, I gave you this because you would be more fair and you would be able to be less emotional during this time. And he had other roles because they would be better fit for his personality. Is that something you would advise people to consider right now? Is like how to, either the parents or the children, or what you want people to do and how to do it?
Yeah, so I will tell you the hardest part of our job is the people issues. I think, I don't know whether Jack Walker coined the term. He's certainly our founding partner. He's the one that taught it to me, but it's the family dynamics that come into play that are far more tricky and complicated to navigate than the legal issues of creating these documents and implementing a plan. So yeah, I think, there's two schools of thought. One school of thought would be, be open and honest with your children while you're alive about who you've assigned what role to and why you've done that. And that mitigates conflict after you've passed away, the fact that you're able to explain your rationale to your kids while you're alive. The other school of thought is, if you don't want people trying to change your mind or talk you out of what you've done, is to not do that and leave behind a list like you were talking about of who's going to do what. which then you don't have your kids trying to talk you out of it, but that could create conflict when you pass away. Sometimes what I suggest to people is if you think there's going to be conflict between your children, if you choose them for, one person to be the executor and not the other kids, maybe don't choose either of your kids. Choose a completely neutral person, a sibling or a niece or nephew or a financial institution or your attorney or CPA or, think about who are the other family members, close friends, professionals in your life that could serve in that role to minimize the conflict between your kids. Another thing that I talk about with my clients is what are the things that the kids are going to fight over? And two of the things that I see most often are, one, your tangible personal property. If you say, give my money 50-50 between my two children, that's pretty easy to do. There shouldn't be a whole lot of conflict about that. But when you say, divide my tangible personal property 50-50 between my two children, well, gosh, you've only got one engagement ring. You've only got one set of china that's been in your family for several generations. And how do you avoid conflict when it comes to those things? And I encourage all of my clients, the legal documents that I draft gives them an opportunity to create a list of who's going to get what for personal effects. And I point that out to them and encourage them to take advantage of that, because that tends to be what people fight over, is the sentimental items. The other things that we've seen folks fight over is the actual final arrangements. And so I don't know if you've read the memoir of Michelle Obama, Becoming, but in it, one of the scenes that she describes is after her father passed away, she and her brother, who have always gotten along very, very well, they're very close, but they got into the biggest fight that they had at that point as adults over planning her father's funeral. And so Michelle wanted to get the expensive casket with all the bells and whistles because, she said her father was wonderful and he deserved this. Her brother said, that's not who our dad was. He was frugal. He would have thought this was a ridiculous waste of money and we should go for something more simple because that would be more in line with who he was as a person, and that's how we should honor him. And they got in a really big argument over that. Thankfully, Michelle and her brother Craig were able to figure something out, and I think they settled on a casket that was pretty kind of between the most simple and the most elaborate. And a lot of times families are able to kind of come together and compromise, but not all are. Sometimes conflicts like that can really drive a wedge between people that take, years to heal if they ever do. And in times like that, even the kids that get along the absolute best, when they're grieving, they might react in ways that they wouldn't normally react. And so as morbid as it sounds, I suggest to my clients that they plan out their own funeral. So what kind of casket do you want? What songs do you want sung? Are there any particular poems or verses that you want read? Who should be the pallbearers? And so the more you can do, the easier it will be on those that you leave behind, to kind of plan those final arrangements, and the less opportunity for conflict among your children or other loved ones who you want to be able to lean on each other, and you don't want them to come out of this with resentments over not getting their way in dad's final services. And so I always kind of at the end of an estate planning engagement, when I'm talking to clients about next steps, that is one of the things that I suggest that they do is sit down over a adult beverage of your choice for most of them and kind of make these difficult decisions and go ahead and start planning that, to take the burden of doing those off of your kids.
That's great advice. Well, what I wanted to wrap up with is something lighter and more fun, because this is heavy. Important, necessary, but heavy.
It is.
I was thinking, I wanted to hear from you what 3 streaming things you'd recommend right now, and maybe a good book.
Oh, 3 streaming things and a good book. Well, I can recommend the book that I just finished, which is Wild. It's actually, this is bringing us back to heavy. So it's about a woman who, I know, but it's the one I just finished. It's about a woman who, when she's very young, in her 20s, she loses her mother to cancer, and she decides to go on this personal quest of hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, and just, figures out who she is, kind of all those, you know, um, all those things that we think about when you go out on a voyage of self-discovery like this. And and it's funny. A lot of the things that she encounters along the way, like, losing her shoes over the side of the mountain. So yeah, that brought us back to heavy, and I apologize, but it's a really, really good, touching book. So I love memoirs like that, obviously. So that's the book that I would recommend. Let's see, streaming things that I would recommend. I think you introduced me to The Good Place, which
Yes.
I absolutely love. So if any of your viewers have not seen that, I would highly, highly recommend checking out The Good Place. Let's see, other things to watch.
So I just restarted Parks and Rec last night.
Okay.
Because that's just safe and funny and easy.
Well, I've got one better for you. I watched Frozen 2, which, because why would I not? Even though this, Frozen 1 I watched with my niece. Sadly, I could not watch this one with my niece because, social distancing. But Disney put it out. I watched it.
There you go.
Not as good. The songs are not as catchy as Frozen 1, but still very good.
Well, that's 3. We're good. So
rather than watch TV.
What? Well, yeah, me too. But when I'm needle pointing, TV is easier to do.
Yeah.
I
do have one more. Big Bang Theory. Absolutely hilarious, lighthearted fun, short, quick episodes. My husband got me the DVD box set for Christmas. Still working my way through them, but
there you go.
I think it's hilarious.
I'm sure it's streaming somewhere. Well, thank you. And I will, see you. I guess we're having drinks Tuesday night virtually, right?
Virtual drinks Tuesday night. Cheers.
Bye.